Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I would like to visit with you about FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So, what is FERPA? This came about, as you can see on the right, there are several laws that are listed that contributed to becoming a FERPA. It is a federal law that protects the confidentiality of student records, and any school that receives federal funding has to follow the FERPA guidelines. Basically, it gives parents the rights for their children if they're under the age of 18. And then once the child reaches age 18, they can also request access to their records. And parents can opt out of releasing what we call directory information. And I'm going to share with you a little bit more about that here in just a moment. So as far as FERPA, it is all records, emails, student files, personal information, they are exempt from disclosure. It means you can't share it with anybody. Schools may disclose the directory information. I'm going to show you a list of that here. Without consent, unless parents and students do request that it not be shared. ACT and SAT data that is collected during testing is subject to the FERPA requirements. The optional personal data, however, that they collect during that test is sold to prospective colleges. So it's really important that students are aware of that their personal information is subject to FERPA requirements, but the optional personal data can be shared. When it comes to citizenship, schools cannot request a student's citizenship or immigration status during enrollment, and there was a federal court case that contributed to that. There is a department, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of the Inspector General. They are the people or the group that handles any FERPA complaints. So let's go into a little bit more detail about exactly what is included in educational records. And so it's anywhere from the student's name and address, social security number, IDs, GPAs, grades, health records, attendance, testing, discipline. So those are all considered educational records. And the directory information that we were talking about that can be shared unless requested that it not be are things like the student's name, address, phone number, email, the photograph of the student, their date and place of birth, grade level, a few of those other things like attendance, degrees, honors and awards received, and then other institutions that they have been attending. So I mentioned earlier that there was an office with the U.S. Department of Education that does file complaints. So in order to stay compliant, it is really important that schools follow the guidelines. And our board does have a policy, and that is published in our policy manual, and it also is discussed in our student and staff handbooks. So I want to share with you just real quickly here this document that shows the 8 ways that you can ensure that you are compliant. First thing is to make sure that your families are aware of FERPA and that your employees are aware of it. Make sure that it applies to you, and with all of us working in a school, it does apply because we are federally funded. Know the rights, protections, and exceptions. Be careful when you choose your vendors, and we're going to talk about this here in just a little bit. Again, make sure your employees are well trained. Implement and be compliant with the policies and procedures. Make sure that you have encrypted files and emails. And then make sure there are other preventative tools. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this here on how we can do some of those things. When it comes to school records, it is really important that you destroy old records following the PTAC guideline. And here towards the end, we're going to talk about how to destroy those records and exactly what to do. As I mentioned earlier, with vendors, make sure that you are using ones that are FERPA compliant. So this could be any online programs that you use, anybody that helps store your data, like in our school with our Skyward, vendors like that. Make sure staff is receiving the important information. Make sure that staff is cautious when they're posting on social media, so they're not being non-compliant as far as FERPA. Here in our district, we have a list of students that will allow you to publish their picture in school photos on the website. And so make sure if you Staff, if you are posting on social media, you get that permission, or I always ask the student, is it okay that I publish your photo? Most of the time, the students that want you to take their picture are okay with you doing that. Whoops, hang on a minute there. I just accidentally went forward. Oh no. Let me get back to where I was here. Sorry about that. My mouse was very, very touchy. There we go. The other thing you want to make sure you are very cautious about is be careful when you're using email and sharing student data. And there is a way that you can encrypt that. And here in our building, we use that specifically with our therapeutic education program students. But you can also use that with your other students. I always, in my subject line, I always type confidential if it's anything that has anything to do with students, and never use student names in the subject line. If anything, you could use initials. So we talked a little bit about data, and I mentioned the PTAC, that's the Privacy Technical Assistance Center. This is a resource that schools can use to figure out their data privacy and what to do with their data once they receive it. So basically, when we receive data, it goes through kind of like a life cycle. From the minute you get it and you capture it, it goes all the way through the life cycle until you're ready to get rid of it and destroy it. And there are 3 ways that you can destroy data based on the type of data it is and how that data has been collected, whether it is electronically, paper, stored in a database. And so those 3 ways are clearing, purging, and destroying. I want to talk a little bit about the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, because we do, as you are well aware, here in Southwest Kansas, we have a majority, or not a majority, a majority of our students do come from out of country. And so in our building, we have a resource officer. They are part of the Garden City Police Department. They are not required to report undocumented students. However, our Finney County Sheriff's Department has an agreement with ICE, and they do permit designated officers to perform the ICE functions. So in our school, and this is the way they've explained it to me, is it depends a lot on a student's address. If they live out of town or on the edge of town where it's county, they can be subject to the Finney County Sheriff. However, in town, the Garden City Police Department is not required. The other thing that is important for families to be aware of is law enforcement records are not protected by FERPA. And as a school, I should only be given access to student records if they have a valid court order or subpoena. Never release that unless it's through the courts. The other thing that we're having to really be careful of is how to keep our student data safe. We've had, especially when we had COVID and the online learning, we had a lot of ransomware attacks. And so since 2013, 120 student privacy laws have been passed. Students need to ensure that their third-party vendors have safeguards in place, and that's what we talked about earlier, like our Skyware and our Edgenuity that we use for our online courses. It's a little alarming that Kansas only earned a C+ on the Student Privacy Report card that was put out recently or last. I guess at least that's average, but I would like to see that maybe a B or a little higher at least. And then there is a question and answer document here that you can refer to if you want some more information on clarifying the FERPA rules. And this would be really important, especially for you classroom teachers where you work with the students daily. As you are all aware, our surveillance cameras here in the building are getting used more and more. There are FERPA violations or laws when it comes to the security cameras. So you can only post a security camera when there is a low expectation of privacy. So for example, we can't put him in the bathrooms, you can't put him in the locker rooms. You must publish your school policy on your camera use. You have to notify the school community, so parents, students, staff, about the use of the cameras. Always consult with your legal counsel when it comes to using the information that's found on a security camera. Make sure you establish protocol for maintaining them so that they are accurate, and also for retaining records. So once you do get the data on the camera, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to use it? In our building, we mostly use it when there is either a complaint is filed, or maybe like the other day we had a small theft, things like that. Then we go back to look at the security camera. And here is a list of all of my references. We had quite a few different references for this FERPA subject. And again, you can always refer to the USD 457 Board of Education Policy Handbook regarding our local policies. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have on FERPA guidelines and regulations. Thank you.